Again, the schedule for today is we have 3 speakers for today. The first is Mr. Clyde Seeley. He's been our host the last few days. He owns the Three Bear Lodge and the Yellowstone tour company that you see here on the desk. I first met Clyde some number of years ago when I came with a group of faculty from the American Association of State Colleges and Universities. And we were stationed in Mammoth, but we came out to West Yellowstone for one day to talk to the Chamber of Commerce about some Gateway City economic issues and to talk to Mr. Seeley about the winter use issues. And Clyde gave an incredibly interesting history of the winter use issue in the area. Clyde is an early business person here. Was the first person that decided this is a pretty cool place to be in the winter and that the tourists would really like to be in the park in the winter. And as we've talked a little bit about gateway cities and them providing the infrastructure necessary for tourists as they're visiting the park, wasn't any tourists, there wasn't any infrastructure in gateway cities. And so, again, as we've talked a little bit about the evolution of winter use in the park with 2-cycle snowmobiles and so forth, this is the man that was behind the whole movement and started the whole movement. So he's going to give us a history of that and is really the head of the whole effort to open the park up for more than snowshoes and snow skis in the winter, to allow more of the people to enjoy the park and to have the infrastructure necessary to do that, to have the lodging and the transportation and, in order to do that. So, Mr. Clyde Seeley, thank you very much.
Thank you. I think he overdid it just a little bit on a few things, and I will clarify that as we go along. Welcome.
Thank you.
Welcome to Yellowstone and to West Yellowstone. We hope that you enjoy it and are enjoying it and will in the future like I have. I've been here a long time, and so my heartstrings are here. And so I think I'd like to entitle my remarks today as The Changing Yellowstone. Yellowstone, 2 ways. One, the natural phenomenon does change over time. Some of it just doesn't seem to change, but some of it does. And then park policy is something that is continually changing, and as we will graphically point out. First of all, I'd like to tell you a little bit about myself for a little background, and we'll lead into all of this. This is where I grew up, on a little farm in near St. Anthony, Idaho, just 70 miles south. We lived off the land. I had 5 siblings. It was our goal, my parents' goal, to get us all through college, because my dad graduated from the 8th grade, and my mother went on to a year or 2 in Rick's Academy, and they wanted something better for their kids. Now, I don't know how you can have anything better than the way I was raised, but they thought there were other ways for us to make a living. So, the summer of 1958, I came to West Yellowstone to work as a laundry boy in order to help us all provide money for us all to get through school. My older sisters had began to work at this place called Three Bear Lodge. And I came to work there as a laundry boy when I was 19. That's the way it kind of looked. Uh, we all pooled our money, basically, and the goal was to get everybody through college. My brother had been here the previous summer and was supposed to go back to work there, but he decided to get married, and so he was engaged and he wanted to stay home and, take care of those things. And so I said, well, I'll go. I'll go in your place. And so I did. And I sent all the money that I made home to him. It was $1 an hour. But I sent it all home to him, except I kept enough to buy a Pendleton jacket for myself. And that was my earnings for the summer. We eventually continued to work there. Then I went through school and spent 2 years in England on a mission for our church, and came back and got married. And in order to finish school, I'd now graduated from Rick's College on a 2-year teaching certificate. In order to finish my graduate with a BS degree out of Idaho State University, I continued to work at Three Bear Lodge. I went there, introduced them to my wife, and after we got married, and I'd been gone for several years, and he said, why don't you come back and work for us? So I did. And excuse me, one day, Mike and Frances Wilson were the owners. Frances and I were out planting a lawn out behind, and she said, and I was 19 years old, she said, well, Clyde, one day when you own this place, and went on with something else, and I thought, what did I hear? And I thought, see, that can't be right. I must have heard something. It just went in one ear and out the other. Little did I know that someday I would. And so we began to work at Three Bear. We managed it, first of all, secondly. Then we leased it, and on January 2nd, 1970, I was now teaching school here in West Yellowstone. The plan was to teach school in the wintertime and run the motel in the summertime because the whole town closed down. Boarded the windows up, no activity in the winter at all. It was just a ghost town in the wintertime. January 2nd, I was teaching school. I came home, signed the papers to buy the place because the Wilsons were generous enough to offer that opportunity to us and make it possible for a couple of little kids to buy this business. Signed the papers, put them in the mail, went back to teach school, and 2 o'clock they called and said the motel was on fire. It had been closed down for the winter. I ran home, sure enough, it was burning. So I quit teaching school. My wife finished out the rest of the year so that I could rebuild. We had to have the motel open for March because there were March races, snowmobile races. So I quit in order to do that. Prior to that time, I did not know this at the time, but prior to that time, 2 Bombardier snow coaches had received permission from the Park Service in 1955, a special permit to go into Yellowstone. And so here they were coming into Old Faithful Inn in the wintertime. I suppose the winter keepers, probably up shoveling the snow, looked down and wondered what these 2 weird metal-looking bugs were that were coming. First motorized vehicles in the park authorized. Then this is Donna Young. First of all, the other fellow was named Harold Young that had the snow coaches. This is Donna Young. They had the snowmobile, Skidoo snowmobile dealership, and they had 5 or 6 snowmobiles and Skidoos, and so they got permission to go into the park. And this was in about 1958, I believe, or something like that. Then I bought a snowmobile. This one right here. An old Johnson ski horse. And I just had a blast. It was fun. You get on this snowmobile, you push on the throttle, and you just go up over the snow and anywhere. And I just loved it. So I'd do that after school. This was, then later, I built a little homemade toboggan for this is my wife and my oldest daughter, our only daughter at the time. So I built this color-coordinated sled so that I could pull my little family yet to be. Incidentally, my daughter, we lost her when she was 29 years old with an acute asthma attack. But we had 5 children, she being the oldest. But we decided that why not keep this lodge open in the wintertime? Nobody else was. And I had such a good time on snowmobiles, I just knew. Going into the park, seeing an awesome thing in the wintertime, going up to Two Top Mountain and seeing the ghost trees and all of that, I just knew, gosh, this is it. If the people just knew what was here, I'll bet they would come and stay in our motel. So I I took some 8x10 photos, and I'm a little farm boy. Had no idea how to market, how to promote. And so I typed up about a 3-page itinerary, and with these color photos, I bought a plane ticket and flew to Minneapolis, Minnesota, and started cold calling on travel agencies and snowmobile clubs and telling them, you just got to come here. And they did. And so a snowmobile club came, and a couple of groups that first year. That continued to grow. The first group, it was a snowmobile club, came 25 years in a row. And as they would tell their friends, and their friends would tell their friends, pretty soon, I told my neighbor next door, why don't you stay open? I was getting to the point where I couldn't take everybody. And so then we got serious and decided we got to promote this thing. And so this is KSL TV out of Salt Lake. They came up, and this was a new and exciting thing, introducing the world basically to Yellowstone in the winter. And we got 15 rental snowmobiles. These were Scorpions. And so we began with that. And it just caught on popularity. So another place would stay open, another rental operation would open up, another, till pretty soon we decided that we wanted to expand some more. So we built a Holiday Inn, which you will see if you have not already. We built a Holiday Inn. That was the first big hotel that was built based on the winter economy, and there were 10 hotels that followed that. By now, it was becoming so popular that we had the park now began to get concerned about overdoing it. And so one of the first meetings that we had in the new Yellowstone, the Holiday Inn, was with the Park Service and all of the local folks, the Chamber of Commerce, the Park Service, the Department of Interior, all in West Yellowstone in our conference room. I was asked to chair the meeting. And the Park Service says, you got to do something. There's too much. And so this began now a 15 to 18 year process of continual going back and forth and fighting. Basically, it's what it ended up with, to be fighting to keep Yellowstone open to snowmobiles, because the Park Service decided that they did not want snowmobiles at all. And the first superintendent that was in that meeting he was new, came into Yellowstone, and he said, I'm going to get rid of snowmobiles out of Yellowstone. And so there began to be a problem. Everybody, I mean, it was so popular. So this is in 2001. There were 57,000 snowmobile visitors that went through the west gate of Yellowstone Park, West Yellowstone. When I started way over here, you know, there might have been 100. And now we've built up 57,200 snowmobile visitors and 5,581 snow coaches. Now the park said, we want to do away with snowmobiles, and we want to make it all a snow coach only park. And so we were all gathered together for our Christmas Eve party in December 16th of 2000. And we had our 200 employees and their families and a big Christmas party that we always put on for our employees. Before that party started, I was told that Judge Sullivan out of Washington, D.C. had just made effective that beginning tomorrow, there would be no snowmobiles in Yellowstone. Now, it didn't work out quite that way because we were allowed to take in 187 snowmobiles. But the town had people that had flown in from all over the place coming to go into the park tomorrow on the 17th. It opened on the 17th. Our employees were all hyped. We were going to start everything. I couldn't face telling them until after the party was over that the park would be closed to snowmobiles. We had just built this multi-million-dollar hotel on the basis of a year-round economy. And here we were, no snowmobiles. 57,000 people had been here the year before on snowmobiles. What happened the next year? Well, it dropped way down here. This is 2014 and 15. You can see how it's growing back, but it dropped from here clear down to here. What were we to do? In order to implement what they wanted to do, the Park Service, in conjunction with and led mainly by several of the environmentalist groups, that got together and were very effective in lobbying the Park Service and saying, we're going to get the superintendent had said we're going to get snowmobiles out of the park. So here's our local newspaper. Park Service finally unveils ban plans. No snowmobiles. So what were we to do? Then an interesting thing happened. Maybe I should go back to that one for a minute. They made hay with that. You can see here's the ranger standing at the gate with gas masks on. The Park Service propitiously placed those gas masks in the hands of the rangers on that particular day when they knew that the press was going to be there on Washington's birthday, the biggest day of the year, when all these snowmobiles were going through. So there was smoke, yeah. But anyway, they made the most of it by putting on gas masks. Well, that's what we ended up fighting. That went out, you can imagine, to the world about how horrible this was. So we thought we'd had it. But the thing that ended up saving snowmobiles in Yellowstone, the one main thing, was that Arctic Cat, we knew, was working on a four-stroke snowmobile. A four-stroke snowmobile engine is like a car. In fact, this is that snowmobile. The first one, we named it the Yellowstone Special. It's a little car engine in it. Now, if they let cars in the summertime, why wouldn't they let cars with a car engine under that hood in the wintertime? So anyway, in the meantime, Don Barry, Assistant Secretary to the Department of Interior out of Washington, D.C., came to talk across the street from the Holiday Inn where we were the night before to the Greater Yellowstone Coalition and said, "We are going to get snowmobiles out of Yellowstone. You can bank on it." The next morning, I sat there and listened to all of that. The next morning I went to Don, got a hold of him and said, "Hey, as to your meeting last night, would you mind coming and meeting with us today?" And so we set up a meeting between he and a few rental operators. There were about 6 of us in the room. And we explained our situation to him about, our winter economy was based on snowmobiles. What would this little town do? What would I do? How would we pay for this multi-million-dollar hotel? And so on. So I got Don Barry. We walked across. I said, "Come on across the street." So we walked across the street, and we had these 2 snowmobiles sitting there. This is a 2-stroke snowmobile which burns oil along with the gasoline. This is a 4-stroke snowmobile that doesn't burn oil. And it's much quieter. And so I said, "Come on, Don, let's just go across the street and let me show you something." So I said, "See these snowmobiles?" "Yeah." I said, "Well, let's do something." So we started up the one. I said, "I'm going to start this snowmobile now." Our guys were there. "And let you and I just walk until we don't hear the sound. You tell me when you don't hear the sound anymore." And that was this first one, the 2-stroke. So we walked and walked and walked, and he finally said, "I don't hear it anymore." Great. We turned around, we noticed. So we walked back and started up this engine. As we turned around, I said, "Now let's do the same thing. Tell me when you don't hear it anymore." We walked and walked a third of the way. He said, "I don't hear it anymore." Turned around and he was shocked to see how close we were. Well, that was the thing that ended up being the salvation to this whole thing. So after the ban, now what happens? So this is another newspaper article that came out. What do we do? What are we expected to do? How are we going to survive? And so, let me catch myself up here. Well, let me finish with Don Barry. So we made inroads with Don. He empathized with us a little bit as a result of this. And so, I mean, how could you not? So anyway, we went on and back and forth, and he was still, of course, he was paid to do what he was supposed to do and get them out of there. So anyway, I was back in Washington, D.C. one time, and because we went back a lot, meeting with the legislators and vice president's office and anybody we could talk to about keeping snowmobiles in the park. And we happened to be there the day that Don Barry was retiring. Before that, he called me. I got this phone call one day, and he said, "This is Don Barry." And he said, "I'm resigning my position as Assistant Secretary of the Interior. And I wanted you to know that you're the 3rd person I called to tell this to." He told the Secretary of Interior, one other person, and then me. Well, that's kind of interesting. He said, "I want you to know that I have embedded into these documents a way for you to keep snowmobiles in Yellowstone." And so I thought, great. Anyway, then we're in Washington during his farewell party, not for that, just happened to be there, and decided to go. So we went to his retirement party, and there we were in the Secretary of Interior's office. If you've not been in there, it's huge and it's lavish. And there were 80-some folks there. There were cohorts of Don Barry's and his employees, and they did the roasting, and the whole thing, and went through all of that. And I was in the other room making a phone call, and my buddy come running into me and said, "Clyde, you got to come in here. He's talking about you." And so I went in. But he told me what he had said in the meantime. And he said, appreciated everybody for being here. But he said, the person that I appreciate most for being here is Clyde Seeley. Because we have been on opposite sides of the fence, and yet we are still friends. And so I walked up to him afterwards. I didn't hear that, but I was told that. He said, I understand you said some pretty nice things. And I appreciate that, and I'm sorry to leave you because I think we were making progress. And that's when he told me that, I think that's when he told me he had embedded these things. Anyway, we left. Jumping ahead, still sticking with Don Barry. Now he became director for the Wilderness Society, or one of those very top offices in the Wilderness Society. And he called me up one day. Said, Clyde, I'd like to come and meet with you. And so he and his cohort flew out, and we met, just the three of us, in a room over at the Holiday Inn. And he said, I said, first of all, what happened? When you were gone, you said you had embedded these things in there that would keep snowmobiles in the park, but no, that's not there. And he said, well, after I left, they took all that out. But he says, I'm now working for the Wilderness Society, and we have some money. We would be willing to help you get set up in the snow coach business if you will just abandon the snowmobiles and get off of that kick and go with snow coaches. We'll get you set up. And I thought, well, that's rather interesting. And I already had snow coaches. We were already in the snow coach business, but snowmobiles was my game. That's what I really think should be in the park. And so I said, well, Don, you're paid to get snowmobiles out of Yellowstone. My very livelihood depends on keeping them in. And no, thank you. I will not accept your offer. Let's just part, agreeing to disagree. And that was it. So Don went on, and I haven't heard anything more from him since. So then the battle began between judges. Judge Sullivan had banned snowmobiles, but Judge Brimmer from Wyoming countered that. And so there was and we called it I called it the battle of the judges, because one judge would say this and one judge would say this. I was in this, a little side note again, I was in the hospital in Idaho Falls with a blood clot in my lung, and was supposed to testify in Judge Brimmer's court in Cheyenne, Wyoming. And the day before, now I was on the mend, but I was not supposed to get out. And I told the doctor, I've got to go. I've got to be in Cheyenne tomorrow. So he let me out, and they gave me the shots, and I gave myself shots in the stomach, for several days. And somebody picked me up, and we went to Jackson. The state sent a plane, picked me up, and flew us to Cheyenne, Wyoming, where we testified in Judge Brimmer's court, and were successful in accomplishing what needed to be done in order to stay this whole thing. Now, as it worked out, because of all of this and because of what we've done and other things, other agencies that were working with us, the snowmobiles never were totally banned. It was cut drastically way down. but they were never totally shut off. Like I said, the next day we were allowed to, I don't remember how that happened, we were allowed to take 187 snowmobiles in that next day for the entire town. We already owned 260 snowmobiles myself and my partner. The Yellowstone Arctic Yamaha's across the street. We were operating 260 snowmobiles ourselves. Of course, half of those were going out of the park and half of them in, but tomorrow there was only going to be 187 that were allowed to go into the park of the whole town. But we were not the only operator, you see. So what do we do? See where I am here. Eventually, we went through this long process, like 15 years or something like this, of battling, never knowing for certain that we were going to be able to operate the next year with snowmobiles. Now, snow coaches were a little different. We got a 10-year contract with snow coaches, so we were certain that we were going to be able to operate snow coaches because they were setting the stage. You see, for snow coaches, they wanted snow coaches in there. They wanted snowmobiles out, but year after year, we'd get a 1-year extension, and then another 1-year extension. So we never knew. We had to order snowmobiles in April in order to be able to operate in December. We didn't know who was even going to be able to operate in December a lot of times. So it was a gamble. What do you do? Well, it went that back and forth that way, and the public has had the same problem. Well, I want to go to Yellowstone, but I'm not going to get my plane ticket and get there the day before and have the park shut down, you know. So the uncertainty was always a problem. Finally, we had a new superintendent, Dan Wink, and they came out with a different, first of all, the plan was atrocious. It was unbelievable. And, anyway, he put that on pause and then went back to the drawing board and came up with a new plan, which I supported because it had in it a balanced situation. I've always believed and supported a balance between snowmobiles, snow coaches, cross-country skiers, snowshoers, winter use. There should be a balance between all of these different users. Well, this new plan was the closest thing that we had to some kind of a balance. So then we went through this whole process. In here are all kinds of documents that we had to deal with. I have boxes of these things, thick documents, winter use plans, and so on and so forth. We had to comment on all the time. Finally, it came down to this. So we finally had settled. Now they were willing to go to the snowmobile operators and snow coach operators and offer a prospectus. It was fairly certain now there was not going to be any more lawsuits, that this new plan was going to be okay. So they came out with a prospectus. This is an offer to all of the operators. Anybody that wants to apply for a permit, a contract, could fill one of these out. Now this looks fairly innocuous, doesn't it? Well, the devil is in the details. And you get looking through this, and one little word that you kind of overlook or you don't think is quite as important as they think can hang you. So we went through months of writing our proposal. And so this is our proposal. And we did really a nice job on it. And I thought, we thought, and realistically, we were the solidest, the soundest operation, probably the most qualified to receive a contract of anybody in the town because of what we'd done and so on. So we submitted these, and everybody in town did that wanted one, and months went by. And I was, finally, I had just been on Face the State in Montana on Bozeman television station, and in which I was speaking, and Dan Wink, the superintendent, was speaking, and a representative from the environmental communities was speaking. There's a half-hour program on KBZK in Bozeman. And they sent me a copy of that, a disc, and I was listening to that and was working on my computer, and up popped an email announcing that they had released the offer, the contracts for who was going to be who had received these 10-year contracts. So I hurried and looked on there, went down the list, and I was not on there. We did not get a contract. Now, we've been only operating for 40 years, 38 or whatever it was. Snowmobiles, snow coaches, perfect records with the park. They do an evaluation every year. We were financially stable, all of the things that you would think a good operation should have. We did not get one. So now what do? We had just completed the Holiday Inn. And then we ended up selling that. And we built, we had another fire at this place called Three Bear Lodge in 2008. And so we were in the process of tearing that down and rebuilding it and so on, and just got it built when this came out. So this is what we were trying to pay for now. Just like the Holiday Inn, 15 years prior, we had to pay for this thing. We had built all of this based on the fact that we had snowmobiles, snow coaches, and we had a year-round operation. Now, I could not take any more snowmobiles or any more snow coaches into park forever. I was done. What do? Well, that caused me some real concern. So, as it turned out, we were told that you cannot buy a contract. These contracts that were issued, you can't buy those unless you buy an asset with them. Now, so there was an operation called Yellowstone Alpine Guides who got 2 contracts. And now he got those contracts and he immediately wanted to sell because he knew that he could pull in some real money now. So he wanted to sell, and I knew I had to buy in order to get contracts so that we could continue to operate. So, and I will say that as a result of that, we did buy Yellowstone Alpine Guides, but we paid at least $500,000 more for that business than we would have, than what it was worth because of those contracts. Can't sell them, but we paid $500,000 for them because we had to buy the business with them, you see. We had to do that in order for us to keep our doors open. Now, as it also worked out, in addition to that, it's really complicated, and I won't go into all of it, just don't have time. But the contractor, those who had contracts, received contracts for snowmobiles and snow coaches. You didn't have to use snowmobiles if you didn't want. You could put them all snow coaches. But so this guy got 2 contracts, there's a snowmobile operator over across town that didn't have snow coaches at all, and he ended up with 5 contracts. 5 contracts. And so there was a program where you could sublet or subcontract with other people to do the other parts of your contract. So we worked out a deal with him to subcontract with him for our snow coaches. So we already had snow coaches, and we already had snowmobiles. So we bought Yellowstone Alpine Guides, which are these snow coaches, and I'll show you more of those. That's the fleet. We bought 8 of those snow coaches, and incidentally, 2 of these are the first, at least one of them, the first one that went into Yellowstone that I showed you earlier, Harold Young's. So then back to this one. Now we were set up so we could have snow coaches. These were our SeeYellowstone snow coaches. These were Yellowstone Alpine Guides snow coaches. And we ended up being able to operate 12 snow coaches and 40 snowmobiles. Now the problem is that the person that we are operating the subcontracts with for snow coaches also wants to sell. That's going to be blood money. And the guy down the street, who is our biggest competitor, also has now sold to a huge corporation. And you can bet that those contracts, are going for $250,000 to $500,000 a piece. In fact, the guy that has 5 contracts, first of all, wanted to sell his for $1 million a piece. Well, he hadn't done it, and he's still operating. But anyway, so my point in this is, who pays for that? Who pays for all of that? Well, I do. But who ultimately pays for it? You guys do. I've got to figure out a way to make those payments. And so in order to do it, we have to increase rates. We've got to support the same thing with hotels and so on and so forth. Anyway, the changing of Yellowstone is continually changing. The infrastructure here in West Yellowstone is continually changing. So, as we go into this, we think now back of the original snow coaches that we saw back here. And what has happened since then? I said to begin with, once the Park Service came out and said, we want a snow coach only park, I said very strongly that snow coach only alternative is the Achilles heel to winter in Yellowstone. Because snow coaches at that time, is the way they were at that time, would never make it. They could not step up to the plate and meet the demands. Because of that again. Here in the past, 57,000, you're going to shove 57,000 people into snow coaches? Not really. So anyway, but the way that it came out, the cards are stacked in favor of snow coaches. And so what happened here is everything dropped down to here. Now this is 2014-15. you can see that the snowmobiles were down lower than the snow coaches. But this year, last year, 15, 16, this is kind of an anomaly. But this year, anyway, what's happening is the snow coaches are creeping up to meet and will exceed the snowmobiles, because the snowmobiles cannot increase in numbers. In our prospectus, we were working on and proposed an electric snowmobile that would go to West Yellowstone, Old Faithful, and back. We were working on it, and it was within 5 miles of making it without a charge. I had Wade Vegas come and ride it, who is next in command to the superintendent. He saw it. He rode it. Also, I had developed this snow coach, which is a new concept snow coach totally, and had that in here that would be environmentally friendly and so on. Why wouldn't that make an impression? So now let's get to the things that really did make the difference. You all have in front of you an orange water bottle. One of the contractors who got the 5 contracts, the snowmobile operator. Now I'm going to over-exaggerate here, but to exemplify a point, I would just say that they put in their contract that they would use water bottles instead of these disposable ones because there's less environmental consequence. And they went on to say what they would do in their lunches. And she felt sure that that was one of the reasons they got the contracts, is because of they were going to do this. So now we ended up with a contract from the ones that we bought from Yellowstone Alpine Guides, and they in their contract had also said, we're going to use plastic water bottles, reusable. So you can imagine, you use this thing forever. You're going to use this once. So the problem is, as we've found out, that if you empty these out and squeeze them up and weigh them, it takes 6 of these to equal 1 of these. Now, you can have these if you'll promise one thing, that you'll use it 6 times. If you'll use it 6 times, then okay, we're winning on the environmental side. We're winning because, you didn't have to go through these 6. So what we found as we have been doing this, and we're stuck with this for the next 10 years, even though we don't think it makes a whole lot of sense for this reason. At least 50% of the people that come and go on our snow coaches, we give all of these, every person, one of these, as part of their lunch. This nice little souvenir. It's wonderful, isn't it? It's a good way of advertising. They can drink it. They can do it over and over and over and over again. At least 50% of them don't even take them. So now we have to dispose of them. We have to dispose of 1 of these. We could dispose of 6 of these. So you have this. You use it. Go ahead and take it. Use it 6 times. It gets warm. The other insulated ones, they're all... Anyway, this is just the point I want to make, is that those people who are making the decisions for those who are on the ground, on the forefront, the operators, the public, the people that are up here, and sometimes sometimes just do not understand what they're really putting into those requirements. Now, let me just quickly wrap up here. So I got to here. I have always been a believer in keeping the mystique, the allure of the original, of the over snow concept. And so I believe and have tried to stay with skis. At least skis on the front, and we had tracks on the back. Going along with the concept of the old bombardiers. As things have developed, now this is the new craze that the Park Service came out with and introduced and said, well, you can use Bigfoot tires. Low pressure Bigfoot tires is a bad word. Low pressure tires. These are 46 inches tall. And they're this wide. And so we have one of those, just to know what's going on with them. They are more economical, and they are quieter, and so on. But it's not quite the same. We want to preserve the old bombardiers the way they were. So, Yellowstone Park and Xanterra sold all of their fleet. They're not going to use these anymore. We bought this out of the boneyard, basically. We're going to restore that so that it will look like these. Because we want to keep the historical snow coach alive. We want to preserve that experience that the people were so awed with when they went into Yellowstone to begin with. We are unique here in that. We will be the only ones, the only operator that operates these historic bombardiers now in the future. And yet, the real future seemed to be there, or is going there. Now I just want to start it out by saying, talking about change. Change? That's where I started. And this is where we are now, after 60 years. It has been an interesting life, one that I would gladly live again, because we've had an experience that, and a perspective that very few people have had. I have since I was a little boy. I was in the farmhouse every morning at 5:30, and every evening at 7:30. We would hear the train whistle by the railroad crossing. You could set your watch by it. The train called the Yellowstone Special that was coming to Yellowstone. And in the evening it would bring the passengers back from Yellowstone. The Yellowstone Special. That's why we named the first 4-stroke snowmobiles. And they ended up providing 50 of them for us the next year, the Yellowstone Special. Questions?